Is everyone ready to get started? Good evening. I'll call this Council Committee work session to order. This is our second budget review. Up front, I'll announce that there are two excused absences this evening. Joshua Scher and Tola Martz are both excused. Since this is now televised, they will be able to catch up at their convenience. Our first agenda item is a discussion of Eastside Fire and Rescue focused on the budget issues and the entire service area. And let me just say at the beginning, we're going to keep this to 15 minutes. A 5-minute presentation, 5-minute Q&A, and 5-minute discussion. And I'm going to get my alarm clock out here and get that set. And for that presentation, Deputy Chief Greg Tryon is taking his watch off and setting it. So, Greg, you are on.
Thank you. I clearly heard something different yesterday. My apologies, although it'll be quick nonetheless. I really wanted to share with you a visual process of how the budget process works for Eastside Fire and Rescue. So using Station 83, which is the Klahani Fire Station, sort of a simple map for me is Station 83. The black circle around it is where they go on calls. A computer's generated what their response area is. The way the current funding model works is that everything inside that response area is part of an assessed valuation. The way it works now at Station 83, the Klahani Station, is that 63% of the assessed valuation in that area belongs to Sammamish. So the funding model says that Sammamish pays 63% of the costs of Station 83, which is $2.2 million and 63% of that. District 10, which has the Klahani portion basically, has 31% of the assessed valuation that's in there. And Issaquah has 6%, which is mainly Providence Point plus some of the Langara apartments and townhomes there. That's how each of the 9 cost centers, which is 9 career fire stations, are done. So when you add 2.2 million up, you get to that, some shared overhead costs, which is the fire chief, my cost, some volunteers, and they're spread out over these 9 stations. An example would be is that, and I'll mention again here, is that City of Issaquah residents utilize the majority of services from 4 fire stations. The 3 that are in Issaquah and this Klahani. So more than half the calls at each of those stations go to Issaquah residents. But City of Issaquah pays dollars equivalent to 2.8 fire stations. That's something to think about as we go forward here. Calls volumes. Here's an example though. Station 83, that same fire station, that same response area. 50% of the calls go to Issaquah residents. Sammamish, 30% of the calls go to Sammamish residents. And in District 10, they get 20% of those calls. As an example, Station 71 on Sunset here, right across the street. Calls, 65% of the calls go to Issaquah, 35% go to District 10. I've got these a little screwed up, but it's the AV, so this is still what's going on. Issaquah pays 53% of Station 71's costs currently. That's the big change that Issaquah is going to see in a year in this current funding model. Okay, so right now, Issaquah is paying just over half the cost of Station 71, but getting more than that calls out of it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, because for Issaquah it's a big impact why Fire District 10 is moving its fire station. So one of the things that Eastside Fire and Rescue needs is healthy partners. Station 78 is at its far end of its response area and is only protecting $1 billion worth of assessed valuation. The way the fire department model works, it needs about $1.7 billion to pay for itself. So right now, Station 78 is not paying for itself. 71 units are having to come down to Tiger Mountain to cover that area. So when District 10 moves that station in a year, it'll be more centrally located. It will be paying for itself, which is healthy for Eastside Fire and Rescue, because what we know is that if a partner is unable to pay for its services, it's a drain on the other partners. It was one of the reasons why there was concern about bringing Falls City on in years previous. 78 moves. All partners need to be healthy, be able to pay for their services. That's kind of why 78 is being moved, so it's actually collecting and protecting all of its service area. District 10 is attempting to do this by moving it. District 10 has also offered to mitigate that $500,000 to $600,000 cost impact to Issaquah in 2015. And there's a couple different ways to do that. District 10 has also offered to mitigate an impact of the 75-25 interim funding model by taking the savings that they would see out of that model and passing it to Issaquah. That's something that they're thinking about and would love to speak to Issaquah about. Thinking about what we have to go forward if Station 83 isn't in this mix. We have some increased response times to Providence Point that we have to manage. It's still within the standard cover of Issaquah, but it's about an additional 2.5 minutes that we have to think about to our Providence Point citizens. We have some other increased costs for not having additional units available to us. Plus, Station 83, if it goes away or something else happens to it, we have to deal with Klahani, the potential annexation area, and how we're going to continue to serve that area. And then finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, Issaquah residents use, i.e. they call 911 for the majority of services from 4 fire stations, plus some other fire stations to a lesser amount, and hence 2.8 stations at EFER's cost. Because we say EFER's cost because $2.2 million for fire station is what is the per station cost. Mercer Island is probably about $700,000 more per station. City of Snoqualmie is about $200,000 to $300,000 more per station in the way we do it. Okay, I'm ready for, that was my quick 5-minute presentation on the nose.
And Greg, was there something else that if you had another minute or two that you would have said?
That City of Issaquah in its current funding, the current funding model for EFER is facing a big jump. And long term, as you've all identified multiple times, it does need to be changed. Everybody would agree with that. How we do that long term is what we're trying to get to. We're trying to create those intermediate steps. So we're trying to get everybody to say this is what the long-term goal is, and then what are the intermediate steps to get there, and what do they look like?
Okay. Paul?
Thanks, Greg. Could you go back to the potential move? The number one question I was hoping to get answered tonight is understanding why this costs the number that you threw out.
Okay. So this example here, Station 78 is literally on the edge of Renton right now. Which means, because this is Tiger Mountain right here, it takes so long for that unit to get to these homes that it's actually faster for the Sunset Fire Station to get there. So it's drawing this Station 71 to those calls. Which means District 10 is paying that 47% of Station 71. When it moves, it doesn't need, District 10 doesn't need the response from Station 71. So what you'll see in the future is Issaquah will be roughly 76%, 77%, and District 10 will be 23% of the cost of that station. And that difference, that quarter, 25%, is $550,000.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? I've got to leave that up there, if you would, Greg.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question. Once the new Fire Station 78 comes online, there will be excess capacity at Station 71. Is that an accurate statement?
You will go from an 88% availability to roughly a 92% availability, so your citizens are getting that fire engine back. The question is, this station in particular has more business inspections, has more public education because of the number of schools that they participate in. So yes, they will they'll be running less calls. They will run less calls.
But they will be providing a higher level of service to other customers.
I'm not sure that I understand
Well,
that.
they're running less calls. They've
Correct.
still got the same capability now.
Correct, sir.
Would we save money by mothballing an engine or equipment?
The question becomes, as the policy for this council, is that the level of service that you wish? Yes, anytime you aren't paying for service, i.e. you don't have units available, that is less expensive.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we do that, but we've got a station right now that is pretty busy as far as calls are concerned.
Correct.
That's going to be reduced in about a year or so when Fire District 10's new station comes online.
About 1.5 to 2 calls a day will be its reduction.
You made a comment in your presentation that if Providence Point was served from Station 71, that would add 2.5 minutes to the response time, but that would still be within the standard of cover, our current adopted standard of cover.
Correct. So
Again,
our-
I'm not suggesting you do that, but I'm just trying to provide an opportunity for some thinking to illustrate a little bit the dilemma that we're in.
Absolutely, sir. And I do have those coverage sheets for you that I can hand out after this. And they would actually come from Station 72, which is the Maple Street station.
Okay.
You would go from arriving in about 6.5 minutes to 8.5, 9 minutes. So 9 minute being that standard to cover.
And I just want to be very, very clear for those that are watching on TV or anyone in the audience. I'm not suggesting that. This
No.
is for purpose of discussion to try and understand the dilemma that our partners face in terms of
And-
cost of service.
Absolutely, sir, and that's your responsibility, and it's a good question to have.
Recognizing we're into the 16th minute, I'll keep it really short. My key takeaway is that this council said that we're going to take a closer look, dive deeper into this shortly at a work session coming up. And now I know that we have a forecast of an increased cost of like $500,000. And that has to play into our near-term look at what to do as we enter into this, evaluating or maybe redoing the structure of the ILA that we're doing right now. So that has to play into it. That's our responsibility to consider that. And I think all the partners need to be aware of that. Thank you.
And thank you for summarizing, and thank you for getting us back on track, Paul. Okay, Greg, thank you very, very much. Moving to our next agenda item, we're going to talk now a little bit about special revenue funds, and this is related to Agenda Bill 6719, the 2014 nonprofit funding, and the Services Committee considered this previously, and Eileen, would you report that item out for us?
Thank you, Fred. There we go. Thanks, Paul. Yes, this came before Services and Safety Committee meeting, and there was a great presentation by a number of the nonprofits within Issaquah. We had a short presentation by each of them, and did recommend to pass through as appropriated here that we have before us. So at work, $20,000 was the suggested support amount. The senior center totals out to be $143,000. It's a combination of salaries and wages, benefits, public utilities, and there's only about $100,000, which is actually senior center programs. The rest of it is utilities and custodial for the center itself. Fish support was $30,000. Historical Society is $80,000. 4th of July is $9,500, of which $1,500 of that is in kind. DIA, $31,500. The Cougar Mountain Zoo, which had a great presentation. They brought a guest with them when they came to visit us. That sort of squawked through most of the previous presentations, but it was great. So they are recommending $10,000 to them. Art East, $5,000, and the Village Theater, $25,000, and Mountains to Sound Green Gray, $9,500, and Arch Trust Fund, $50,000. So an overall support of about $414,000. It was supported by all the council members, and we voted on this, haven't we?
I think
Yeah,
so.
I think we have, yes. So this has already come before the council and passed through. So a great presentation that evening.
Great. Questions on this item? This is about the same level as last year? And I'm trying to refresh my memory with respect to, are any of the amounts that the committee and the council approved significantly less than what was requested?
So the one significant change was last year Arch had received $100,000, the Arch Trust Fund. This year's proposal was at $50,000. That did go through the Services Committee and was reviewed at that time. The other one was, which is new, that wasn't funded last year, was $10,000 for capital to the Cougar Mountain Zoo, which Eileen talked about. And then the asterisk item up there was there was some debate at the committee level about funding for the Historical Society as it related to a $25,000 request for a feasibility study. That is not included in that $80,000, which the committee had asked as we went through budget deliberations to look at that number. I don't know if you wanted to explain a little more what you guys talked about on that one, but it is not included in this appropriation.
It's not included in there, and it is for a study, as they're having some difficulties within their organization, and they felt that it was important for them to take some time to step back and do a study of what they're doing. And they didn't have the dollars. It was just 25, isn't that correct?
That's
$25,000.
That's correct.
Thank you, Paul. And it was recommended that we look hard at that because we felt there was value in what they were asking, and that it would definitely help the organization get a stronger foothold as they move forward.
Stacy?
It's really a sustainability question. They're having some trouble thinking about, as Eileen said, moving into the future, and so it's a study to that they're not capable of doing on their own for a number of reasons, manpower-wise, mostly. And so there was some feeling on the committee that if we had some money, we certainly would like to look at the possibility of funding that.
So, I guess that's a question for the council that's hanging out there, and the question is, do we want to support $25,000 for a study that would look at their sustainability? And I guess I'd like a little more definition around what that study would do, the scope of work, or the, what the purpose is to before we make a decision on that. So if we could capture that as a question and a request for additional information. Any other discussion on this topic? And Okay, so now we would be moving to the packet and the presentation. And so Diane, are you up now?
Yes, sir, I am.
Diane Marcotte, our finance director.
A little bit about our first, kind of recapping our first budget session that we had on October the 14th. On October the 14th, we spent the majority of the meeting talking about the council goals, some overviews, but more importantly, we spent a lot of time talking about the general fund. The general fund represents about 30% of our overall planned expenditures for 2014. And when you stand back and look at what the cost of those expenditures are in the general fund, the majority of them are for services. So within the general fund, there aren't capital projects or things that have a lot of variability. It really has a lot of consistency from year to year as far as level of service and plan programs, whether it's a recreation services or whether it's financial services or legal services. It's always interesting because that's the one area most of the general public is interested in, because that's also where the services are provided, whether it's for development or for police. But when you stand back and look at the fund, there really isn't a lot of changes from year to year unless we maybe are putting in a request for additional staffing. So I sort of want to, and so what a lot of the conversation tonight will be about those funds and a lot of the operations where year over year there are a lot of changes depending on what capital projects we might be doing or whether it's a special piece of equipment that we're looking at purchasing. So the conversation tonight will be having a little bit more interesting discussion on the various capital projects. So we have a series of funds called special revenue funds. And what a special revenue fund a special revenue fund is a fund where there is a source of revenue. When it comes in, it is dedicated for a specific purpose. And so under accounting principles, we create a separate fund so that we can track both the operations and the money in and money out. We have about 5 special revenue funds. The first one is our street fund. It gets the majority of its funding from the general fund. In some cities, in some cities, the street fund is actually a component of the general fund. The city of Issaquah has chosen to separate that out and make its own separate fund so that we can truly see the cost of maintaining our streets and our bridges and all of those various operations. One of the things that we did differently is that we used to transfer a lot of the salaries that are part of the engineering department but are attributable to operations because they do some work in there. We are now accounting for that in the street fund. If you recall, our conversation last time was this Public Works Engineering Fund, at the recommendation of the state auditor, they have indicated they would prefer that we actually account for the cost of engineering in those funds that are benefited. Since this is the first time, we had to use some estimates, and then as we go along throughout the year, we'll be looking at those salaries and benefits and cost of operations, and we may need to come back and realign the proposed budget as we get more experience, given that this is the first time. Overall, there's an increase of 3% in the operating cost. There have been some increases in material and supplies, and then the other cost would just be your standard increases for personnel salaries and benefits. There's really no additional programs being offered in the street operating fund. However, we'll be talking a little bit later on about the street capital fund, and that is a different fund where we account for improvements or construction of our projects associated with our street infrastructure. So this is just purely operations, whether they're out, as we show here, whether they're out snow plowing, whether they're out making some repairs and maintenance. So overall, it is pretty much a status quo.
Thanks, Diane. Can you show me where I'm looking at page 5-2 of the budget itself, the budget document. Show me the 3%. because I see expenditures, well, I don't see, that's the, it's 3%, so the 3.6 million there, the 2013 estimate.
Yes.
So it's 3.7, so that's the total, all operational, so that expenditure total is operational
Yes.
total.
But-
That's really what I wanted to get clarified, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's on 5-6 for people that are following along on the budget.
Oh, okay, I'm seeing it in 5-2, where,
Yeah,
It's
just wanted to make sure everybody was staying along with us.
oh, you mean from,
Street fund.
5.2.
5-2.
Lisa's-
They must have a better budget than we do. That's the secret.
Okay, we see the challenge. I borrowed somebody else's book who was the creator, who manages the budget document, so.
Other, I think the 3% is the 3.6 million to 3.7 million.
Right, right. So, there is, so that's dipping, so I'm seeing there's quite a reduction in the ending fund balance on that. What do our policies, how do they guide us on the ending fund balance of such a fund?
Because there is no guidance and there's no required guidance on the street fund, because it receives the majority, if you look on page 5-2, the operating transfers in, that 1.8 million is coming in from the general fund. And so when we look at the overall reserves in the general fund, it includes the 8% on the 1.8, you know, between the 8% and the 15%, so that's included in the general fund. So a portion of it is quasi fund balance reserve, because so much of the money comes from the general fund. Did you follow that?
And so is that part of the 25% of the general fund that goes in, is dedicated to capital according to our financial policies?
No. If you look above, no, the general fund supports the majority of the operations for the street fund. And that 1.8 million, when we look at the general fund reserve of total expenditures, that 1.8 million is considered an expenditure in the general fund. So therefore, when we calculate the reserve requirements, it includes the 1.8 million. So at least half of their expenditures is included in the general fund reserve. You want to give it a shot? We look confused.
So I take it that if you count both ending fund balances, you're actually counting it twice then?
Yes.
Because it's getting counted once in the general fund
Yes.
and then getting counted again as the ending fund balance in the street fund.
Right.
Which is part of the general fund.
Yes. And so the bottom line is there's no requirement under accounting principles to have a reserve. You should just have sufficient money to handle any emergencies that might come up.
So then the fund total amount is really, so you have two fund totals on there. I'm sorry, this is really kind of some basic questions about the information that's in the document. So in the revenue area, you have fund total, and in the expenditure area, you have a fund total as well. So is that effectively what was that? That's the total spend? Or that is the,
So we plan on starting the year with $1,016,708 in beginning cash. That's at the top of the chart.
okay.
Then we anticipate getting a little over $3 million in revenues for a total resources available of $4.183 million. Then we come down and we say of the $4.183 million, we plan on spending 3.7 million, and we plan on carrying over into 2015 approximately 464,000. So we are reducing the cash available in the fund by approximately 600,000.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So that's a pretty significant reduction. So what are the implications of that?
At this point in time, there is no negative implications unless there's something extraordinarily unplanned in relationship to the street fund.
Because of that transfer in?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
It means we start at a different, lower place next year, the year after. That's what it means.
It doesn't impact us this year, but it does next year, which was what I was sort of getting at
Yeah.
also.
Well, and that also assumes we know that to some degree there might be, included in this plan is some significant increases for charges for services and for supplies and equipment. And part of it is, it's an estimate based upon general information we received about 3 or 4 months ago. So if some of those, we increased probably about $40,000 or $50,000 on our supplies because there was a belief that some of these costs are going up in the future. If that doesn't transpire, then that money stays in the fund and gets carried forward to future periods.
Okay, what do you want to talk about next, Diane?
We want to go to the next fund, which is called Community Sustainability. And that fund is managed by the Office of Sustainability. As you recall, this year they have 2 components to their fund. They have what we call the operating component of their overall fund, and then we have the fund that when we receive donations, we would also account for it in this fund. If you go to 5-10, their budget is one of our smaller budgets. The planned expenditures for next year is around $940,000. We are using, one of the things that we're looking at is the allocation of their expenses in relationship to how they benefit the utility funds. So we'll be spending, one of the projects next year is to really look at their accounting. They've also done a lot of, they've been very successful recently in getting some grants. They've increased their grant-related revenue around 41% to $148,000. They've also done some program restructuring. They've been working with the school district to do a partnership agreement, and then they have a grant to do some volunteer training. Dave Fujimoto's here to answer any specific questions about a lot of his program-related operations. Included in this fund are resourcing for 4 individuals to help promote the sustainability program in the city of Issaquah. So the majority of their expenditures are related to salary and benefits. You can see nearly over 70% of their expenditures are related to salary and benefits. Once again, the fund balance is the cash in the account anticipated at the end of 2014 will be approximately $30,000 less than what we had originally budgeted for this year. And don't know what else to say about this small fund.
Questions?
There's, in the personnel cost, there's no position changes.
There is not. And the difference between 2013 and 2014, and the difference of 596 versus 690, is that we've had a position vacant since May, and then that we would anticipate filling next year.
Okay, next.
Next. So the next fund is our lodging tax fund. looks like we got them a little bit out of order. The Lodging Tax Committee, which I believe Councilmember Barber is the chair on, we had originally in the budget, we had budgeted around $90,000 for estimated program expenditures for next year. The committee met and indicated that they wanted to allocate $104,000. If we would then have to, when we submitted the final budget to the council for consideration, increase the expenditures, the additional $14,000 in order to provide the funding for the organizations that they have recommended. And I would turn it back to Councilmember Barber if she has any additional comments.
What page is this fund listed on, Diane?
514.
5-14.
Thank you. Eileen,
Are there any questions in regards to this? There was two requests that we did not fund this year. The first one was Verdict Cultural Center, and it was just an interesting project, but we felt the organization was not ready at this time to successfully use these dollars, so we asked them to come back to us next year with a little bit better plan, perhaps if they are able to do a little bit of the intended festival that they wanted to put on at the Highlands. We just felt that they were not quite ready. And the other was the Village Theater, and it was thought that this was the inappropriate source for funding at this time, and they are funded at the nonprofit status quite well. So there was, as far as going over on the budget, there was a lot of conversation in regards to the fact of the new hotel coming on, and there didn't seem to be a concern in regards to spending $14,000 additional. Joe?
The tourism business plan, is that implementation, or is that study, or is that?
They have put out a request for proposals, and they've received 4 or 3 proposals back. They're reviewing through those, and it would be for the implementation of a plan, and also for the necessary skills to put it into effect for next year. Operations.
And the chamber will determine what that will be, and we're going to fund it based on their recommendation?
Not just Economic Vitality Committee, isn't Keith also helping with that?
Yes.
As far as the review of that particular information that they received back, going through the different plans that they'd received, making sure that the plan is going to be appropriate and the ability to carry it out and appropriate for Issaquah.
So this would be the total funding for tourism for 2014 through the chamber and the city then?
Yes.
Sometimes I get a little confused on the title of the different plans that are underway. Is this the business plan?
So this would be their business plan, and they would be contributing some matching funds as part of this. This is not the full operation, so they would get the plan done, and there would be several recommendations for future funding, and then the chamber will have to make some determination of what that future funding for those operations would look like. But as Eileen mentioned, this puts into place the initial, getting the plan completed, finalizing the RFP, and getting that contract done for next year. So this puts it in place.
And so that's funded this year. We've requested, we're evaluating proposals based on funding this year, or this will fund whatever proposal we decide to go with next year?
So they have the proposal, they didn't have any money to put it in place. So this is going to fund the business proposal for the business plan for the tourism for the chamber, yes.
So this amount in whatever the chamber matches will successfully carry the plan?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, they've seen the plan. They know what the plan is going to cost.
No, they don't. This is just
So the RFP was just to get a consultant to do the plan.
Yes.
So they're aware, the chamber is aware that if it costs more than 15,000 whatever they have to put into the plan, that the plan is going to have to be scaled.
Yes.
to match that.
Yep.
So we're not going to have somebody coming back mid-year and saying, this is a fabulous plan, but we need another $50,000 to implement it.
So the
That's what I thought I heard you say.
yeah, so what you're going to get is they issued an RFP, and you're going to get a plan. This will produce the plan, and the plan will have several recommendations. Those recommendations are likely to have some costs affiliated with them. What we don't know, because that plan hasn't been done yet, is what those recommendations will be and what the potential costs to implement those would be. So all this does is it hires a consultant to come in, do the evaluation, and give us a business plan for tourism. Doesn't fund any of the recommendations. So if I were to look in a crystal ball, I suspect that there would probably be a future request in the 2015 budget for implementing the actual plan, but this is to produce the plan.
But I didn't think they had selected yet. No, they haven't selected the contractor. They have put a request out for proposals, and they will be reviewing those proposals and making a selection, and then we'll be implementing at another time.
So there will be no tourism for 2014 actually taking place. It's just the plan that's going to take place.
From funding from this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a study,
Yes, it's a study.
and the 15,000 pays for the full study.
There's going to be some match, I suspect,
some
from the
match. I'm
chamber,
sorry.
yeah, but this would be the city's
Okay.
contribution.
And then the next step is, okay, now we have the study, what do we do with it?
Right.
Okay.
Question? Is this level of detail in the budget document?
It is not, because at the time of publication of the document, the selection by the LTAC committee had not been made. So in the final document, we will include it, but it's not in the preliminary.
Thank you. That's why I couldn't find it.
Yes, they had made, we had to publish without them.
Yeah, because
The remaining special revenue funds are on this slide. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have one more question. The $14,000 above the suggested amount of 90, this may be a question for Councilmember Barber. Was it just spread out, the extra 14, or did it go to a specific, do you remember?
I was trying to think where it went to.
and while you're thinking about that, so my budget document says 94.5, not 90.
The additional 4,500 was a request because one of the award grantees this year wasn't going to be able to complete everything, and they had requested to carry forward their funding to next year.
And my apologies, Stacy, I don't remember which one of these had, and I don't have my full packet with me this evening.
Okay.
Where the additional dollars went.
Sure.
But
Thank
I can
you.
report back and send you an email.
Okay, the next fund is our cemetery fund. That is on page 5-4. Once again, this fund, it's a special revenue fund. It's a very small fund with operations of only about $78,000. This fund is very consistent from year to year. It includes a part-time parks maintenance person during the summertime to keep up the grounds. And then there's some other charges for services. And then there is some operating transfers out, which goes back into the general fund for the overall support of the indirect costs. So the fund is very consistent. We're not seeing anything unusual or any activities that cause us any concern at this period of time. The next one is the municipal art fund. At this time, the committee has not made any they have not made met and made any recommendations. They anticipate meeting in November and December with bringing some recommendations forward in December and January. The pieces that we know of tonight is as a result of the opening of the theater, we're anticipating some additional revenue in this fund by approximately $30,000. One of the new things that we are making a recommendation for in this fund is that we have a number of pieces of art And the director, the person that manages our municipal art fund is recommending that we start looking at a maintenance program in order to maintain our existing infrastructure that we have as far as art, is making sure it's clean and that if it needs any repairs or maintenance. We have also allocated $25,000 for monthly events, whether it's film festivals, the chalk art, and so that would be $25,000. The award program would be $111,100, so that would be what would be coming back to the council for consideration. And then one of the other conversations that the Art Commission has been having is we want to begin setting some money aside to actually commission some artwork. They're estimating, the commission has not really met and come up with anything in particular, but they've asked that we begin building some reserves someplace between 25 to 50,000. So then the commission can then award something that would be something physically in the city. The arts grants programs are usually programs and activities. They don't result in any physical pieces of art being acquired. So with this increase, the commission is recommending that some of this money be used for actual commissioned artwork to be located someplace in the city. So at that point,
Would hanging flower baskets be an item that would be considered under the municipal art fund? And if you don't want to answer that, you can capture that as a question. And if hanging baskets were included in this, would the maintenance of those, would that be an appropriate charge against the art fund, like the art maintenance plan that you mentioned earlier? And if this is not the appropriate fund, well, what would be the appropriate fund for bringing the hanging baskets back and watering them during the growing season?
okay.
Joe?
I hope people notice that they were brought back this year and they were maintained this year.
They were.
And downtown Issaquah, I think, from what I understand, is planning on doing it as an annual event,
Well,
unless I'm mistaken.
I don't think they all came back, only
No,
the
you're right.
number that people volunteered to pay for.
Right, but there were
But
a
there-
lot more than I thought there might be.
I agree, Joe. And Dia should be thanked for that Mother's Day initiative to provide folks an opportunity to contribute to that. So you've got my question. Okay.
So
Stacy?
The set aside for commissioned artwork, the $25,000, where would that be in the budget?
Overall, you'll see a capital outlay of 15,000. And so, I think, I have to get back to you because we have two different numbers.
Okay.
We have the 25 and the 15, so I just need to get clarification from Amy Dukes on our conversation about
And this
that.
would come out of the existing municipal art fund budget?
Yes.
Okay.
They felt like it was reasonable, given the additional revenue stream that was coming in as a result of the new theater,
Okay.
that it would be nice to do something like that.
Okay, next.
The last fund that's a special revenue fund is the communications fund. Once again, this fund has a lot of stability. It is on page 5-13. You can see that there is a request a small increase to increase staffing. This is really related to part-time non-regulars. When we started talking to some of the departments and what their plans were for next year, we realized that the Planning Commission would be holding more meetings, and so there would be more evening meetings where we would need some people in to manage the filming of those meetings. We're increasing the capital outlay, which goes to the equipment rental fund. It's an operating transfer. We're increasing from 20 to 30,000 with technology and things changing and some improvements. We were looking to set a little bit more money aside long-term in order to do some improvements to our overall audio-visual equipment. And once again, it's a special revenue, and it's a very, very consistent fund. No changes in staffing level except for the additional part-time folks. And with that, I'd answer any other questions on this fund. Okay, moving on. Okay, moving on to our capital projects. Those tend to be a little bit more interesting. Our first fund is the Capital Improvement Fund on page 7-2. This fund is the fund, as Councilmember Butler asked a little bit earlier, of our sales tax that we collect, 25% of it goes into this fund, and then 5% goes into our street operating fund, and the remaining portion goes into the general fund. The overall budget provides a balanced budget without any cuts to the overall departments. We're planning on some intergovernmental revenue, which means that it's money coming in from other entities, municipal corporations, for reimbursement for some of our expenditures. We have some miscellaneous revenue that comes primarily from rentals of some of the city's existing buildings and assets. And then we are recommending a mitigation fund transfer in of $205,000. That $205,000 is composed of $150,000 for the skate park and $55,000 for the feasibility study of the Issaquah campus. So those are eligible under the definition of mitigation funds. How we would spend that money is we're recommending that the street overlay program, that we provide $390,000 for next year for the street overlay program. And then the skateboard park would be $350,000.
Just a quick question on the street overlay program and the general condition of our pavement evaluation system that we have ranks our streets as to what kind of condition that they're in. The $390,000 will bring us up to an acceptable standard for all of our streets. Some of our streets, or what is that percentage? I guess what my question is trying to get at, which I didn't state it very, is this adequate to maintain our streets at a level where they would not deteriorate to the point that it would be very expensive to replace those streets or to overlay those streets. We wouldn't be getting into the sub-base.
The $390,000 will not maintain the streets at their current level, which has declined slightly over the last couple of years. So the funding to maintain the status quo is significantly more.
And significantly more
is in the neighborhood of between $1 million and $1.5 million.
And that's over and above the $390,000?
No, that would be total.
That's the total. Okay. Thanks, Brett.
Welcome. The next project that is recommended for consideration would be the skateboard park. Of the 350,000, as I indicated earlier, 150,000 is coming from the mitigation fund, and that we would propose using $200,000 out of our real estate excise tax to fund this. Just a little bit about the project. The site selection committee would include various stakeholders that would have an interest in this project, including the Issaquah School District, the police department, the Issaquah Network Drug-Free Coalition, citizens, and active users. So in the Parks and Rec Department recognizes that it's very important to bring the various stakeholders together when making this type of a consideration for a skate park. The goal would be to do both design and construction by late 2014. With the already previous council conversations that we've been having this year, there's a recognition that this project is important to the council, and they have already began doing some planning and some organizing on how they're going to begin moving forward. And Ann McGill is here if you have any specific questions. Going over to the next page would be the recommendation that we dedicate $87,000 to making improvements to the Tibbetts Creek Kitchen. Currently, we have a very old and outdated kitchen facility that dates back to the 70s. That's more traditional of a house, since that versus something where we are holding some significant events, whether they be weddings and such. So what we would do is we would update for greater efficiency for catering to keep the food warm, but more importantly, we would be taking down some walls and doing some reorganization so that there would be more room. That would be a great room where people could come together. So it's just simply doing some remodeling to make it more efficient. And also what that does is by making some of those changes, right now when you go in, if you're holding an event, you can look right into the kitchen. What they would want to do is make it more private, so when people are there to enjoy an event, they're not looking into the kitchen. Also, because by opening it up and having a larger workspace, that allows for different market options or different market targets so that we can bring some different groups in. The groups are between a little bit over, probably around 100, 120. And so that just gives us some different options and a different market target because it's more open, and people nowadays like that more open concept.
Will this be providing a commercial kitchen?
No, it would not.
So there's still, a caterer still would not be able to do anything other than warm and serve from this kitchen?
The concept would be to have that out in the garage area. Mm-hmm. The concept would be create a staging area that would provide for probably refrigeration, maybe warming. They have all the stuff. That's what they do at the Tibbetts Creek or the Pickering Barn currently, is they come in with all their own stuff, and they're fully prepared to do that. So the open floor plan, as Diane mentioned, would create more seating capacity, which is the biggest hindrance at that facility.
So some of the interior walls that are now there that really confine the room, I mean, there's like the studies, you come in the front door, that wall would be removed to just make larger room configurations instead of the 4 or 5 smaller rooms we have out there now.
Correct. Yeah, and we have to maximize the space as best we could. With load-bearing walls and whatnot, trying to figure out the best use and how we can do that with the available funding that we would have if this were to be approved.
Yeah. Okay.
So is it more than a kitchen remodel then?
It's more, kitchen remodels a tentative term in a way. What it basically do is take the kitchen and create a space that would add capacity to that and make a larger room for seating, and move the kitchen and the staging area for the caterers out into the garage. So you create a larger space for people to sit in an open area, because the biggest thing that the rental staff hear about as far as a hindrance to that facility is the amount of people they can put there.
So it's moving the kitchen.
Yes.
Okay. And so will this result in increased revenue from rentals? Is that why we're doing this?
Yes, it would be, it'd give us a larger space to rent, so they could put more people, like Diane was mentioning, you can seat, right now, if people seat a larger group, say in the 120 plus range, they're sitting up towards the front of that house that has those separate rooms that they can't even see. If the bride and the groom party were sitting out in front, they can't even see them. So this would open that up more so that the people could have a larger great room to see the activities and be a part of the activities as they go on.
Do you have any projections on what the increased revenue might be from the increase in rentals?
I knew that question was going to be coming. I do not, hard to say.
Because I'd like to know how long it would take to pay for
Yeah.
the remodel.
So I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, and, well, the answer, I think, is it's not going to be much. Because, the facility is such that you're not going to be able to, chances are you might see a 5% increase, but the facility is really used by a lot of nonprofit organizations and nonprofit groups. And so, this conversation happens a lot with the Recreation Department on that use, and they're pretty close to hitting the maximum revenue they're going to get out of the type of the facility that it is. So, and we've talked about is that, it meets a certain community need, and so it's never going to be a significant moneymaker for the city. There's always an opportunity that if you wanted to look at this, evaluate it from just return on investment, there may be a higher and better use on return on investment for the land.
Right.
But then the community groups that use the facility are going to either start paying a much higher rate or they're going to end up being relocated. So I think the issue that we're finding here is the house is a 1980s house that's been maintained, but it's getting to that point where you're kind of maximizing the viability of the space. And so I think what the rec department is saying is the rentals that we do get, it doesn't really meet the potential need. So I don't think, next year you'd come in here and you'd say, well, gee, we saw $50,000 increase in rentals. It's likely not going to happen. Maybe.
Right.
but
Well, we have seen an
likely
increase,
not.
with the market. This year we are projected to bring in roughly right around, our estimates are 114. So we have seen an upturn in the amount of revenue and rentals for this year.
114, like 114,000.
1,000 in revenue, yeah. And the total expenses will be about I believe right now we're looking at about 116 by, it's close, yeah. What do you have down at the 115? Yeah.
So you can see one of the things is it's always difficult to budget on the revenue side. We do have many events booked out 2 years, and so we tend to be, in this situation, we tend to be a little conservative on the revenue side. So you can see when we came into 2013, we had budgeted $110,000 in revenue and expenditures of $116,000. When you look at where we're at as far as 2013, our estimates, you can see that through September the 30th, we had a profit from their operations of around $14,000, and we would anticipate by the end of the year they would have a profit of around $9,500. So, and then going into 2014, one of the things is the difference between the 116 we had planned in 2013 and the 141 was that reallocation of utilities and insurance. So what that does help is it helps us get a better understanding of their true costs, which heretofore wasn't necessarily included. So, but we do know that with some additional investment, there's some greater opportunities.
Okay.
It sounds like a larger discussion,
Paul?
potentially.
Before we leave the capital improvement fund, if we're off this
Oh.
topic in there, I want to go back to the revenue part.
Okay. Just a general comment. This one sort of caught me a little bit by surprise. I didn't know that it was one that we've been talking about for a while, and I'm not sure where it falls in our capital improvement program, where the priority is, and so I would have to go back and look where that priority is, and I don't know whether this was included in what the council approved when we approved the capital improvement program. Because this one is sort of new to me, so if someone could just jot a note down to help clarify where this is in the approved capital improvement program that the council approved this year.
We can bring that to the next deliberations
Thank you.
meeting.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks. So back up in the revenue section. And Diane, I know you said this earlier, and I was trying to capture your notes. So the other revenue sources, I think you gave the breakdown for the intended use, or the reasons for why it's 205, skate park and the campus facility study. Where's the revenue come from?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the whole question, so
In the other revenue sources line, 205,000?
205, that's the money that comes in in the previous slide at the very beginning. That's the money that's being transferred in from the mitigation fund.
It's all from mitigation?
205, yeah.
That's what I want.
150 for skate park and 55,000 for the Issaquah campus.
Are there different mitigation buckets of money? It's not parks, obviously.
No.
It's from, go ahead, answer for me.
The mitigation money, there's different categories depending on what is being paid. So we have separate mitigation for fire, for police, for parks, for general services. And then in some cases, if it's a SEPA, it could be specific to like maybe trees or landscape. So there's a difference between mitigation money and SEPA money. So all of that is captured, and because the revenue source, as required by state law, we actually manage and track the revenue for police as it comes in. Oh, and street, that's another big piece with street.
So I think, and then just to supplement, what I think I heard you ask was, where did the 55,000 of the mitigation amount come from? And that is, the city received, was it nearly $9 million, I think, from the Lakeside Development Agreement in mitigation funds. So the 55,000 of that would be out of the 5 million set aside for municipal facilities. We can talk a little bit more about it if you like when we do the City Hall study, or we could talk about it now, either one. If you've got some additional questions on the expense side.
Not
Or intent.
at the moment. They
Okay.
will form, and I will ask them when they're ready. Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about the Tibbetts Creek kitchen remodel. I guess we're going to move now to the tenant/office improvements at City Hall Northwest.
Yes, that's a carry forward. In 2013, we had budgeted around $100,000, and they are still doing some work, and they put in a request to carry forward $30,000 because they still have additional work to do there. So this is just reappropriating existing proposed expenditures from this year's budget and carrying it forward to next year's. On the police department, the next one, the $49,530. 23,000 of that is reimbursed from King County 911 funds because it is related to our dispatch center. And then the additional 26,000 is, if you recall, last year the police department came forward and said that they had an opportunity to do some improvements to their Spillman software, and they would be paying for it over 5 years. There was an agenda bill presented in early 2013, I believe, or late 2012 to do this improvement to their software and then for us to pay for it over 5 years. So this is just the second of 5 years worth of payments. The next one is the council goals and how we had planned on the overall. What we have included is the overall goals, if there are other resources used to support those goals, as well as the allocation of the 90,000.
So this was a question that was asked at the last meeting.
Right.
And so the 90,000 was in the capital fund, if you go about midway down in the middle briefing, under other services and charges. Studies and plans, council goals, $90,000. So it's on page 7.3.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, and so one of the questions you asked last time was, how is that being allocated in terms of the actual amount? So the 90 had been not directly allocated. So when we answered your question, the part of the 90 is the piece that is the directly related to the 90 that was in the budget. And then the other piece, if you recall, when we went through the discussion piece last time, we talked about some of the funds that were allocated in the various positions within the budget. So I was going to hand this out till a little later, but it's the same information that's up there. So as it relates to the 90,000, goal 2, to do measurement reporting services, which are some of the dashboards that we talked about, of that 95,000 would be included in that. The business marketing plan, council goal of that 50,000 was related to that. The healthy community strategy, neighborhood engagement plan, this would be 30,000. And I think David's there. David is there, in case you have some questions. And then in terms of expanding citizen voice and participation, there's 5,000 affiliated as part of the overall 90. So the question was, how was the 90,000 distributed? And that was that's the distribution of those. Those other items, when we get to the council questions, if you wanted to talk about it, wasn't specifically allocated in the front end in terms of the money, because it's at different locations. And so when we answer that question, we can go through that chart as well.
I'm troubled. A little while ago I said 15,000 is all we're spending on the tourism plan, and you say yes, and now it says 25,000. So I'm not understanding, why 15 minutes ago all the city was spending was 15,000, and now here we've got a slide that says we're spending 10,000 more. And I want to make sure that I ask the questions correctly in the future so that I get the answer that I'm looking for, instead of getting an answer that comes up to be different. And I don't know if it's not the same thing or what the deal is, but I'm kind of curious what the difference is.
From what I remember, there's $15,000 from LTAC, as you see up there, for the tourism business plan, and then Economic Vitality Department, or Economic Development, had $10,000 additional that they were putting in from, I understand, this year's budget. That was going in to help support this particular tourism business plan.
So the 10,000 is a carryover from this year to help support that, and then there will be additional funds that come out of the 2014 budget in their salaries for time that are put into doing it also.
So if I could get back to you with a little more information, because when you asked the question before, I recalled the 15,000 in the LTAC presentation. And then as Eileen just mentioned, there was, I guess, an additional 10. So what I think would be useful to answer your question accurately is to get the full proposal. We'll know the full cost, and then what the city's contribution is and what the anticipated chamber contribution is.
That would be great.
So I apologize if I misanswered your question.
And Joe,
I may have misunderstood what the answer was.
I had an email from Matt today too, and I tried to read through it, and he didn't help with the understanding of it any more than what we've got going here. So I definitely think an answer back would be appropriate.
Yeah, and if the answer could include what the total amount, short of what the chamber's match, if they know what their match is, it would be nice to know what it is. But I'd like to know what the total amount that the city, short of wages, is going to be putting into it.
A complete picture.
And complete picture's right, because it seems to be, well, to me, I have a hard time really understanding exactly what we're doing. It seems to be a moving target. And we had the same difficulty during our council goal setting, trying to understand the different components. So there's the tourism biz plan, and then there's the business marketing plan. And so the complete picture would, in my mind, and then there is the, I think, is it the business marketing plan, or is it the economic development marketing plan? We've got different terms, and I get them confused, because we're going to be developing marketing material, and I'm not sure whether that's the business marketing plan that we're talking about up there.
I'm looking back on the lodging tax fund page. Where is the business marketing?
That's a city.
That's a city.
That is not, I
Okay.
see my
Well, but it
understanding
says-
is we're helping, we're collaborating with the chamber to do a tourism plan. The other one is our city,
Is-
our own communications department primarily, doing efforts to market Issaquah.
That's right.
But if it says,
Did I have that
LTAC.
right?
Yeah, you hit it right on
it says,
right
it
over the
says
park.
LTAC.
So 5,000 of that is being funded out of the LTAC fund, and that was a request primarily to do social media marketing of the city. So there's two variances. One is some of the overall marketing and print materials that'll get developed, and the other 5,000 is actual marketing of the city. So if you want, Autumn is here that can answer
Should it be on
those
here, though?
questions. On the LTAC fund? Is it not? I think it is. It
Well-
says citizen voice.
Where?
Third from the bottom.
Yeah. Oh, there she is.
Where does it say citizen voice on?
I don't see it.
Okay.
What page of the budget?
Third from the bottom.
No, on
On the
this,
LTAC that we just looked at.
on the LTAC spreadsheet. No, this,
Oh, council goal, oh.
Well,
Oh, that's a different.
okay, so why don't we,
The numbers.
I think you've heard the discussion on the confusion. Let's put it on a piece of paper and explain and clear the confusion up so that there's a clear understanding that we know what we're doing, rather than trying to figure it out tonight and maybe put something out
Right.
that's incomplete.
So I'm not sure the question is clear. Is the question clear? LTAC, is it centered around LTAC?
It's centered around activities and how they're funded and what's the purpose of the activities.
Okay, so I asked that because I think I've heard multiple questions.
Along with that, I'd like to know more what the
business marketing
business
plan.
marketing
Well,
plan is.
So that's what I heard.
Because you
one of
said
them.
part of that was material. Is the majority of it a consultant that's going to put that together, or is that working with the Economic Vitality Commission to do that, or?
The five, which one, the
50,000
50?
For the business marketing plan.
5,000.
You getting the question down? So I heard, how is the 50,000 being spent on the business marketing plan? And then I heard, I think the previous question was on the $5,000 for the LTAC. What does that look like?
Well, not
What
only
was
that, but
planned?
it doesn't line up with the spreadsheet.
So
It's not on here.
That chart,
Is
on
old?
no, it just got missed. So that,
What we understand is the dollar amount is correct, but if you actually add up the details somehow or another, when we pulled the data in from the department information, the 5,000 allocation got lost in translation.
Yeah, I plugged them in. The numbers on this sheet add up to 99,000. And then, I was going to ask you about that, that difference of 5,000. So that
5,000 is
explains
for
it.
the, yeah.
Okay.
so there was a presentation at services on that amount, and that was, the 5,000 was included in the recommendation from the LTAC committee.
It was.
Yes. And then if you want a little more detail, Autumn can give you a little more detail on the plan, I think, if you have questions on how the 5,000 is being spent.
Okay?
Well, is that going to be part of our so I thought one of the questions was more information on the business marketing plan at the next meeting, so we can get all
The
of
whole
that
thing,
together.
okay.
Complete picture, I think, is the.
Well, complete picture on two, tourism business plan and business marketing plan. Okay.
And so I will stir on this page while we're still here. So we entered into this page talking about the 90, because it's 90,000 from the,
Capital
and
fund.
is it I want to get the name of the fund, I'm going to look it up, capital improvement fund. And so, so 5,000 for the goal relating to developing key metrics and making them available via some dashboard online, something like that. 50,000 for the business marketing plan. We know we're going to get about that. So 30,000 for the healthy community strategy and neighborhood engagement plan. So could you talk about that part of it a little
Sure.
bit?
David?
And so David, I'm thinking about that. This is the capital improvement fund. So I'm trying to line up using monies for the capital improvement fund for those.
I'll have to have you answer that question.
So this is, we've sort of inherited this. When you look at the capital improvement fund and you go back into the history, because a portion of this is coming from sales tax, a lot of this fund and the expenditures over the last 20 years have been used primarily for unusual type events. While it's called the Capital Improvement Fund, if you go back 20, 25 years, you will see it's been used for studies, it's been used for streets, it's been used for debt service, it's been used, it's a kind of almost a misnomer in its title in the sense that it's been used for one-offs or unusual transactions. Because in the general fund, it's pretty much the operations and the day-to-day, and this is to fund those unusual things, and the funding source is sales tax in order to provide that activity. So it's something I inherited.
70, is that the 75-25 split?
Yes. Yeah. So this is really consistent about how we've used this fund in the past.
So it's consistent. Is that typical? Are there other ways then?
There are other ways of doing that, absolutely. The way this is established, there isn't any requirements under either state law or accounting principles. What we do is we actually do some things behind the scenes to make it all work for accounting purposes. But if you go back into this council's past, last year we used it for impact fee studies, and before that you use it for various other studies. So, and I don't know how what the history is and how it evolved into being this sort of multi-purpose, multi-expenditures.
If you read the description on page 7-2, it appears to be very specific. Your explanation sort of leaves it wide open.
Yes. You can certainly change it and go back to capital.
Not asking, just an observation.
Yeah.
Don't do anything based on that observation, please. Okay, where are we right now?
So Dave was going to answer some questions on healthy.
Well, we're going through this at a fund time, so I
Yeah.
think the other slice through is that item obviously has,
Yeah.
you've got 95,000 there. So if there's a more appropriate time that we talk about that. I mean, this is a case where, I like the idea of going through it by fund like we are, but when a particular initiative is it's getting its money from different areas, how are we gonna handle that? I mean, just like we just asked, let's talk about the business marketing plan, right? That's also getting its funds from multiple locations, so.
Yeah, and that
Do we
comes
have that
from
forward in our agenda, or our plan for this whole budget session to actually?
council. So this is all related to the council goals. So
Yeah.
we talked about it first night, and then you would have that discussion under deliberations when they're being pulled out of the different funds like this.
And so if there's it would be nice if there's a specific question that would help, and information that would be helpful during actual budget deliberations, it would be good to identify that question now.
Well, so let me take it up one level. As we discussed last time, from a general fund perspective, our planned outflows exceed our planned inflows, and what are we going to do about that? And so we know that. And so I'm expecting we're going to have a conversation about what items can be changed. And so, actually both of those goals, you wrap them together there, I proposed them, and the council adopted them as a goal, but now when you see, and you can say this about any of them, now that we see their impact on the full budget, we see them in the context of the full budget, I think to make informed decisions, to have informed deliberation about maybe changing this budget because we want to do something different with the ending fund balances, then I need more. I'm going to need more information about anything that's new. And I think we're naming, and to me, I'm talking to my colleagues on the council as much as anything, all our goals are on the table in my mind as well.
I would agree with that, because there's a fairly large budget item supporting one of our goals that I don't believe I could support, knowing what I know now. So the problem is, we don't know what the proposed budget's going to be when we're, sort of talking unconstrained during a goal-setting session, which is sort of what we do, and the administration then tries to accommodate what they heard during our goal setting and figure out a way to do it. And so I agree with what you're saying.
So this information is helpful. I'd like to continue this kind of fund approach that we've started on, and I think we'll just take a note that these are the structure of these and how you're going to fund these are complex. So I'd like to, I think we're going to have to take some time on these, focus on them.
And I would offer up, when we looked at last year's, because it was at a departmental level, you weren't really seeing the full impact, particularly like one of your questions on the capital improvement fund. Last year, when the department presented their study, they would say, I'm doing a study for $50,000, but we really never talked about the funding source, which would often be like the capital improvement fund. So I think in this way, it's becoming more transparent, the revenue and the funding sources of it associated with the various projects.
Okay, so let's move along.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
David, you got off easy.
Yeah. One of the priorities in both the capital facilities plan and just organizationally is, while we call it a financial system upgrade, it's really an enterprise-wide update. We're estimating the overall budget to be approximately $600,000. Of that, $120,000 would be funded out of the capital improvement fund. And the remaining portion is coming out of the equipment rental fund. What we have been doing is, over many, many years, we have been doing a set-aside for the eventual replacement of the software. So it would be a fully funded project at this point in time, with the funding sources coming from two different places. The next one is we have approximately $315,000 in studies. The first item is for annexation analysis. This would be primarily for Klahani. If the annexation were to pass, one of the things that we would need to do immediately would be to do a census. And so this would be the funding that would needed to do. That's one of the first priorities within, if council were to adopt the annexation, I believe within 30 days we would have to do that census, and so we would have to have that funding. If the annexation did not go forward, this money then could be considered for council for reappropriation to another topic or to another issue. So this is a placeholder in the event, when we look at our overall expenditures with Klahani, if the annexation for the operating costs, we would bring that forward as far as a plan, but this would be something that we would have to do immediately. And then we spent a lot of times talking about the council goals of 90,000, the city hall feasibility study of 55,000, which would be the mitigation money. And then the council has been having some council workshops on the Central Issaquah Plan concurrency study, and we would estimate that number is around 50,000. Some newer numbers since that period of time says it could be closer to 60, 65,000 since we had published the preliminary, but we would follow back up with council on when that number really gets tied down and bring you back at, whatever the recommendation is at that time.
And I would just make a general comment on the City Hall feasibility study, since that's related to one of the goals that I talked about. Knowing what I know today, I would have a difficult time personally supporting that one, just as a general comment. So that's one that I would want to talk about during budget deliberations.
Which is an interesting point, because it's over here in the capital improvement fund.
But it came from the Lakeside DA money. So I would highly doubt that I would support it for 3 reasons. One, I don't think it's an appropriate use of the Lakeside DA money. The other one is we don't have a plan for how we would even pay for it. And as I mentioned last time, that study would be stale before we had the money for it. And the third reason is I don't really think, given all the needs that we have in the city, particularly transportation, that our citizens would think that that's a good expenditure of money.
Thank you for
But
making my argument.
But we can talk about it later.
We can. Okay.
Okay, and I believe,
I'm sorry. The financial system update. Now, in the document I have, it says 110,000.
I
Did you already
know.
speak to that?
no, it was just, it's a typo.
So
The 120, the 120, it's really 110.
Okay. And that is that, what do we get for that?
What we would get is the new software.
So often implementations like this they span more than a calendar year.
This is, we would, so this is the 600,000 is the overall project cost.
Okay.
What we anticipate is we would probably have like an 18-month implementation. So we would then, let's say it's December of next year, we would reappropriate the unspent balance.
So is that 600 reflected in our capitals facilities plan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That we approved in August?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good answer.
Oh, I'm sure it was. You're helping me keep it straight.
The next one is, as Councilmember Barber indicated, we are recommending funding of the Village Theater for capital purposes of $25,000. The largest item coming out of this fund is our debt service payment on councilmatic debt of $2.3 million. This fund has been used primarily as the funding source for the payment of previous capital improvements that the city has undertaken. And then there is a transfer out to the city shop construction fund of $60,000 for those purposes related to general government activity. When we get into the city shop construction fund, you'll also see that there are some transfers coming in from the utilities. And so we'll talk about that when we get to it. I don't know if we would go on to the next fund. I don't know if you want to take a short break or continue marching through. It's whatever.
What's the desire? We got one marching through, one break. Break. We've got, we'll take
When the big hand is on, what number are we starting? No,
when
seriously.
the big hand is on 10 till.
So when the big hand is on the 10, we're starting up again. Okay.
cold it is now.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are back in session, and where we go from here, Diane?
We go to our next fund, which is our mitigation fund. So the mitigation fund is a fund that has a lot of legal restrictions associated with it under state law and how that money can be spent. So we spent a significant amount of time tracking the inflows and outflows of this fund. You can see in particular this fund, the beginning fund balance is up significantly, and that has to do with the $9 million that Bob Harrison spoke about from Lakeside. So once that goes in there, then we track it according to the various categories. So we have the estimated beginning fund balance of $11 million. We're anticipating around $330,000, the various revenue categories to come in for 2014. For the fire department, there is a recommendation for $849,500 to be spent out of this fund. Of that, $750,000 is for station upgrades. $74,500 is for heavy-duty lift. I lost a word along the way.
Mobile lift equipment?
Mobile lift device. And then $25,000 for fittings on the fire hydrants. And so that comes to the $849,000. There is sufficient revenue available within that fund to pay for this portion of the budget appropriations.
And so the $750,000 for Station 71 operational upgrades, and I'm sort of going back to the discussion that we began this work session with on Eastside Fire and Rescue and the funding, and I've heard comments from time to time that I'm beginning to question what we really need at Station 71, and the upgrade, and a pretty almost $750,000 in upgrades to it. And so I guess my question is, do we know enough to know that we ought to be making that kind of an investment in upgrades to that station? And I don't need an answer tonight, but I just wanted to flag that.
We can get back to you because it's included in the capital facilities plan as a project, so we can provide you with the detailed information as well as additional information from the district.
Okay?
So in other words, it's in this budget because we approved it in the capital facilities plan.
And that's the capital facilities plan, let's maybe have a little bit of a digression here, is a planning document.
Mm-hmm.
So when we begin developing the budget, we look at those items in the capital facilities plan that we truly believe we have the available resources and funding for. In some cases, as we get into the budget development, which occurs many, many months after sort of our planning document, there are things within the plan that when we look at the inflow or resources, there isn't sufficient funding to accomplish everything in the plan. And so in that case, depending on the revenue stream, it gets readjusted. In this particular case, because we have mitigation money that can only be spent on fire-related, when you compare that against maybe something else in the city, the mitigation money can only be spent on fire facilities. It cannot be spent, for instance, on police or on streets. So when we look at this, the capital facilities plan, we just have to do kind of a balancing act because the requests are submitted in March, and a lot happens between March and October when we actually complete the budget request.
And so I understand what you said, but my question goes a little bit deeper than that. and it goes to our Eastside Fire and Rescue's fire stations in the locations where they ought to be, or should they be in other locations, and are they positioned best to serve the needs? Now, I know that we've got an existing fire station there, and so it is where it is, but I just want to make sure that that investment is the appropriate investment as we look at our longer-term needs for station locations and how we serve our service area. So I understand the process, I know what changes. It's a broader question, and it's one that probably no one is in a position to answer this time. It's more me just thinking out loud as we've been spending a lot of time talking about fire service and the funding model and things of that nature.
How would a person, where would we get access to? You talked about the mitigation funds, fire, street, parks, and it's very controlled on how we're collected and how they mechanisms for how they can be used. How could we get the details? Because they're not in the budget document.
Right. Because it's all maintained within the fund, we have a spreadsheet that we maintain that talks about, the resources, inflows and outflows. We can certainly, not sure what level of detail you're looking for.
Well, I think, and I'm going to go back to the council goal of city campus. And we moved money from the mitigation fund over the capital improvement fund
Right.
to, in this proposal, to fund a study. Now, I'm assuming then that that's probably the, I think the category of general services. There's mitigation for general services.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a kind of an important detail. Like, here is capital that came from mitigation, and we want to use it for general services. So it seems to me that the mitigation fund probably has some type of rolling number for every one of these, right? For fire, here's a rolling amount over the next couple of years that we have to spend because of the rules. We've collected for park, and here's what we're going to have to expend for parks over the years and for general services and what have you. And I just think that we're looking at mitigation in other areas, and I just think that level of detail, it's just transparency, right? Because I don't get to see it here, especially when you see something like a feasibility for campus. I'm just using that as an example because it's convenient for me right now. Out of capital, really got funded from mitigation, but from mitigation, I really didn't know what the general services balances in mitigation or kind of what that rolling plan was. And so it's just that level of transparency I would find helpful.
So I think the request is show us the year that that mitigation funds, each of the mitigation funds need to be spent by, and carry that out. So we've got, is that hard to do?
By next Tuesday, yes. We can certainly come back at a later date and kind of talk about, the majority of the funding in this fund has not been appropriated because included this funding, for instance, is the $965,000 for the municipal campus. So that money is still continuing to be protected within this mitigation fund. So I can get you balances in particular as of 12/31/2012 when we did our most recent reconciliation, and then we're fully reconciled, and I have all of the detail. And what I did was, when we did the overall financial statements, what I do is I look to say, okay, we have 10 years to spend this money. Is there any money at risk? that we could potentially lose if we don't come up with a project. As of 12/31/2012, we had none of our discrete allocation of funding at risk.
Through what year?
Probably we have, the only place that we have a little bit of risk would be anything to do with fire. We probably have 3 to 4 years left to be spending some sizable amounts on capital facilities. But all the other funds are pretty much, got 8 years left, 7 years. Actually, when I went in and did the reconciliation, like one of them has like 3 months. So we've been, particularly on streets, we've been using that money to help leverage some of our grants and use some of that money to help do the local match related to street-related projects. So we can see how much we can get you between now and Tuesday. But definitely we can get you reconciled and give you all of the detailed information through December 31st, 2012.
So I appreciate that, and I think going back to when you mentioned the planning process, I really think probably the crux of my wish is related to planning as opposed to this budget right now. I mean, I think the time to have that information may have been way earlier in the year, like like in the middle of 2014, when we're putting together the facilities plan. So, I mean, I don't have a burning need to get that detail today because I realize that's a big pile of work, and it probably won't result in any changes. But I think as a tool going forward, it would be very helpful.
That's very doable.
Okay.
And then if you go on to the next page, page 53, what we have left is we have transfers out. You'll see the $205,000 that we already talked about, which is the $150,000 for the skate park and the $55,000 for the feasibility. And then we're recommending that we transfer out to the street improvement funds in order, what I just spoke about a few seconds ago, in order to match some local funding for some capital projects. We'll have Sheldon Lynn and Brett Heath up to help us walk through the capital improvement fund. And as you can see, at this point in time, we still are recommending, because we haven't identified any associated projects, that we still continue to hold nearly $10.3 million in cash until such time as we can fully, vet some of the future projects. So, moving on to the street improvement fund. We're estimating just high level that the fund will begin with $1.6 million. We're bringing in taxes and intergovernmental revenue and other revenue of $11.5 million, and we're recommending the ending fund balance would then result in $659,000. When you go in and look at the fund and the overall expenditures for capital projects, this is a sizable increase in how we're spending money in street-related activities. A good portion of this is for the proposed LID number 25. And then the largest project, a very significant project we're doing, is the Rainier Boulevard improvements. So Sheldon, there he is. So we've identified the major projects and their components, and Sheldon can speak to the specifics of the projects.
Okay, so the North Issaquah LID number 25, that one would continue to do design work and the like and also property acquisition if the LID forms or other funding sources become available to implement the project.
Sheldon, where did the $9.4 million come from?
That's an estimate of what the engineering, property, right-of-way acquisition work would be in 2014, based upon a work program of getting started first part of next year.
Are you, on the revenue side, of the 9.4 million, 3.6 million would be coming eventually from LID participants. And what we would do is, if this project, as it moved forward and if once it becomes fully realized, we would then go out for some interim financing, whether it be a line of credit associated with the LID. So that's about 3.6 million. 4.5 million would be the money coming from the state that was part of the capital appropriations. It's 5 million, but they keep
They
50,000
keep 50,000 of it.
for administrative purposes.
Right.
And then our local funding portion that is coming out of street revenue, but that too would eventually be reimbursed, is almost nearly 400,000, which is street-related activity. But when we went to full financing, that would then be reimbursed.
And there's also another $975,000 grant from PSRC for design work. So Rainier Boulevard North improvements.
When will the,
Sorry.
when will we form the LID?
We've been working hard to try and reduce some of the costs associated with the project, and so we have to go out to the benefit district and talk to the property owners in the district to ensure that that which we've proposed reducing with the administration would be acceptable to them. Following that, my guess is it's probably going to be somewhere around mid-year again for
So
formation.
next year, we would form the LID.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Sheldon, before you move on, so Diane, that was impressive. You just pulled those revenue numbers right off the top of your head. Are they in here somewhere? Can we tie them back to anything? But you can't really, can you? Because we haven't formed the LID, so there's no revenue in the budget from the property owners, or is there? No.
Well, if you go to page 711,
That's what I'm asking. All right.
we have indicated that
Use a page-
of the revenue stream, 4.9 million is coming from the state. Then Sheldon talked about the 869,000 coming from the grant. And then I just happen to know that the 3.6 million would be part of the interim financing. So typically, budgets don't go down to that level of detail when you're looking at them. So part of the reason is having the council workshop is this, I mean, this document would then turn into a 500-page document.
Is someone going to say something?
Well, I'm ready to go on to Rainier Boulevard North if you guys are.
Drive on.
Okay, Rainier Boulevard North, that's a project where the city was successful about a year or so ago getting an ecology grant to essentially continue the same type of project that we had on the southern section of Rainier Boulevard North. And it will complete Rainier Boulevard with curb gutter sidewalk, also doing improvements along the frontage of Confluence Park, which will include some parking and things of that nature and a sidewalk. And it will extend all the way to Juniper, but it will not go into Juniper. It'll stop just shy of it.
So it'll stop shy, and it won't go out to Gilman either to take care of that.
That is
that
correct.
difficult intersection that we have.
That is correct. It will not. This
Do
is
we have just a timeline to correct that?
there's a project in the capital improvement program known as Three Trails Crossing, which we had begun that process this year, but we've held off on it to try and save some money, and we don't have any construction money for that project either. So we were trying to get going on the design, but
I know that's a high accident area.
yeah, it's an issue for pedestrians and everything else too. So complete streets. that $620,000 is estimated to what the project would be is to put sidewalks on Northwest Dogwood between Issaquah Creek and Newport Way. There's a number of gaps in the sidewalk that exist there. There's some ADA issues and the like. And so we would get sidewalks on both the north and south side of Dogwood, Northwest Dogwood, completed. The other capital projects, the Northwest Dogwood Bridge replacement, that's a federal grant to replace the Northwest Dogwood Bridge. The money there is about $80,000 federal money, $20,000 city, and that's to finish the design work that we started this year. Construction of that project would not occur until 2015. ADA transition study, that's a continuation of this year's funding, rolling it forward, reappropriating some money that we didn't get spent this year on it. We were successful to a large degree with the ADA transition study this year. We got a lot further on the assessment of the facilities than we thought we would with the interns that we hired to help keep the cost down on that study. Traffic signal replacement, Brett would have to talk about that, and the traffic calming program is a placeholder for if we have neighborhood issues, we can go in and do some capital improvements as needed.
Can I go back to Dogwood for a second?
Sure, you bet. The bridge or the road?
The bridge.
Okay.
So we're doing just some study this year,
We've begun the design this year,
design.
and we will complete the design next year with that money.
But do we have dollars secured for the actual replacement, or is that we do?
Yes, we do. We have 80% federal money for the entire project through construction.
And intended start time would be
2015.
15. Okay.
We weren't able to make the fish window for 2014 due to other issues.
Okay.
And traffic signal replacement is actually traffic signal loop replacement, so that's an annual program to keep the loops in good shape.
So, as an exercise, I was trying to map these back to the TIP. And where, and which I think is the right thing to do, right? We put together the TIP, we put together the facilities plan, and then you do the budget. And so, one of the things that's come up since in the last few weeks, and I sent you an email and you sent me some information. There's an item on the TIP, and it's the Northwest Sammamish Road improvements. And I wanted to bring this up with my other colleagues on the council, that a number of our citizens from the South Lake Sammamish area, and I know have raised this issue, and I think it's one I would like to propose that we consider to try to make work in this year's budget. But Sheldon, could you explain for us? I know that you sent me an email, outlined a study in particular it would be intended to do design work for maybe what is recognized as an area that could use some attention. It's a well-defined scope.
Yes.
Could you explain that to us?
Yes, the area you're referring to is a place where the Northwest Sammamish Road essentially gets pinched by I-90 on the south side, the wall basically of I-90, and then on the north side by the single-family residential homes and a steep slope. And so the road is not capable of being widened in that area without likely having substantial impacts on some single-family homes. And so the study is outlined to do substantial surveying, grade work, and pre-design work for just that section. It's about 1,000, 2,000 foot long section to do the evaluations to see if the road can be widened enough to accommodate pedestrians and the bicycle lanes through that area without taking any homes, or how many homes would have to be taken to be able to accommodate the pedestrian movement through there. And so the study is estimated to cost somewhere around $100,000.
So if the council wanted to do that, say we wanted 2014 and put that in this, as a project in this budget, would you be able to do it in 2014?
It would only be the study.
I understood.
And it would probably bring it to about 50, 60% design for that section of the road. It wouldn't do the whole road. From the terminus of the larger CIP project or TIP project that you're speaking to is a lot longer and
Yep,
further. And
yep.
so this is just a very small portion of that project, but it's the place that has the highest degree of impact.
Right, so if I looked at the TIP, that project description is broader than
Much
this
broader,
focus
yes.
of this.
And so the study, design study would be done in 2014, and it would probably also give you an estimate of what the cost would be to finish the design work and construct the project just in that section that's studied in 2014. That's what the $100,000 would tell you. It would tell you the impacts and what it would cost you to fix that segment.
So there's been a request to add that project for consideration during deliberations, and what would the impact to the budget be, and where would the money come from? All of the usual questions associated with a new project. And as a part of that information, I think it would be helpful to understand how that would compete for grants, because that is a very, very narrow place. I don't know what the accident history there has been, but we have had we had a petition brought to the city council meeting a number of months ago, and there's been a flurry of emails recently expressing concern about that location, and ask that we consider that during budget deliberations.
Could we also get and this maybe has been done, for $100,000, we could maybe do some restriping and extruded curbing or something like that. I've got a really good idea what it's going to cost when we get through with the $100,000, and I think if the $100,000 could do something that could give us a lot longer term, even if it isn't a whole new sidewalk, if we had some sort of thing that could help protect pedestrians. As part of that, could you just kind of get a quick idea as if there's anything that we could do in restriping and extruded curb or anything like that that would maybe help the situation in some way?
We've already done that.
Okay, I figured you had. Could you also present that at the same time with the $100,000?
Oh, no, we've already done the striping work.
Oh, so it's all, everything
Yeah.
you could do has been done?
Yes.
The only thing that would maybe help?
And there's about a 3-foot wide shoulder on each side of the two 10-foot drive lanes, and that's about all you have through that area.
In that
and
one
it's
area.
very
Got it.
confined for cyclists to use it, pedestrians to use it, and you're constrained. It's a very tight section of road.
I don't want to go too much more into a detail on this, but one idea that did occur to me, because I bicycled down it a couple days ago, and I've done it numerous times, in that, do a pedestrian walking back from town, headed westbound, right? They'd be on the south side of the road. They should be if they were facing traffic. And I wondered to myself, one thing, there are any signed crosswalks. So if I was in Issaquah and I was walking back to my neighborhood there, I should walk on the south side of that road. And if I did that, however, to cross back over to my neighborhood, there are no marked crosswalks anywhere. And I don't know if that was ever given any consideration, but it just seemed to me there were logical places along that route where if we had marked crosswalks, then if part of people's discomfort with, being vulnerable, whether they're, not in a motorized vehicle on that route, is if they're walking on the wrong side of the road because they don't feel comfortable crossing it, it's something to consider. And I don't know if it was ever considered before, and I don't know if it's, a great solution or really a bad idea, but it's notable how there are no crosswalks on the street.
And Stacy just asked me a question. There has been some discussion, I believe, about a trail through the wetlands, and I know the pinch point that you're talking about is further along the road, but I don't know what it looks like between the back of the houses there that we're trying to get past and the lake, and whether there is a way to come through there that might offer a safe way and less expensive. Now, I don't own a house there, so it's easy for me to say that, but I guess my comment is just meant, you've heard some suggestions from Joe, you've already looked at things. Let's take a pretty comprehensive look at what the solutions might be as you're trying to define the project. I know that you've been thinking about it a lot, and you have met with a number of the neighbors at City Hall Northwest in trying to solve this problem.
So I think our request is, could we see a proposal for what that $100,000 study could look like in the budget? I think that's what we're asking.
That's
for,
what we're
right? A
asking.
You want
proposal
the
from,
actual consultant proposal for the work? Because
no, I mean, as an item in the budget.
how it fit in the budget, yeah.
I mean, it might be very simple. It's street improvement, or maybe, there's this thing about mitigations, things happening like this sometimes. It may look a different way.
Okay, great discussion. Let's move on.
Thank you.
I think the next fund is the shop construction fund. In this fund, as we talked about earlier, 60,000, the revenue source is coming from general government because it's the street fund, and then water, sewer, and storm are the funding sources for activities in this particular fund. You can see that we have capital outlay proposed of $255,000 for next year, and then the ending fund balance is pretty close to the beginning fund balance. Those specifics of the projects I would turn over to Brett to provide you some detailed information.
Okay, well, Issaquah Highlands Storage Site, that's for design and construction documents for the storage facility at Issaquah Highlands. For
Do we have a
160.
location for that, Brett?
That's the site behind the reservoir. College Drive and between College Drive and the reservoir at Central Park. And this site is a shared site with Public Works and Parks. So they're fairly excited about having a location that is right next to Central Park. They'll be one of the main users of that particular site.
Brett, can I ask you a question? So
Yes.
what have we spent on that site so far?
The site was in the improvements that were made to that site were part of the mitigation from I think it was the TDR project that built College Drive and the work that went through there. So there's several $100,000 worth of improvements on that site plus the land that was spelled out as maintenance site in that mitigation package. So it was part of the I think it was 1.9 million in mitigation funds that were associated with that, something along those lines. So those funds paid for the initial improvements on that. Beyond that, there hasn't been any other funds spent to date on it.
So the money for the fencing and the trees and all of that came from that fund?
Correct.
From that TDR
Correct, from the mitigation.
transaction?
The 70,000 for shop improvements, that's for the updating the space study and beginning preliminary design for the next phase of the maintenance facilities. And then shop equipment is, that's a UPS, some upgraded UPS equipment for our servers and storage for fleet, storage container.
The next fund on the list is the Newport Way Fund. This is a fund that has been around since 2000. It has a balance of $145,000 from some previous projects. We'd had some conversations among staff about closing this fund out, but in conversations with Sheldon, he indicated that not next year, but in future years, we have some improvements that we need to do to Newport Way, and this would go towards funding future projects. So at this point in time, we're just recommending that the balance continue to sit there until the projects get more underway. Did you want to add anything, Sheldon? So no planned expenditures for this fund. The Centralized ITS Fund is a fund that has also been around for quite some time, and it has some remaining funding from the bond issue. Just a little bit of background. One of the things we had done, because this is bond related, during 2013, we had an arbitrage calculation done to make sure that we were still in compliance with the federal requirements related to the bond issue. During the council goal setting, there were some questions about funding, some flashing yellow turn arrows. At the time, while the project did not make it up onto one of the council goals, we were asked as staff to see if we could find some financial resources to accomplish some flashing yellow. And so Sheldon and I sat down and we looked at the bond covenants, and we did some checking to make sure that this would still be in compliance with the overall covenants from the bond issue. And it is, so we're recommending that $75,000 be appropriated from this fund for the flashing yellow arrows.
Do you have locations? Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay, the next one is the Transit Center Fire Station. This is some remaining funds that are left over from Station 72. And at this point in time, not really knowing what might happen organizationally with Klahani and Station 83 and the overall issues related to fire service, we didn't make any recommendations. We just wanted to see what was going to be transpiring in 2014. So there's no planned expenditures. We would just keep this in remaining cash, and it would be available should we need it for other purposes related to fire service.
So it could be, other fire service would be, this could be used for other fire service, not necessarily this particular fire station.
Correct. Highlands Park facility, in 2013, we had around $16,000 in cash that's remaining from this particular bond issue. During 2013, the Parks Department is hopeful that they will expend the additional resources, because we have not officially removed this fund from our inventory of funds. We're just simply showing it as a zero balance, and then in 2014, when we have spent all of the financial resources, we would come forward with an ordinance to deactivate this fund. The Park Improvement Fund is some remaining funding that is left over from Confluence Park construction. So we're simply moving it forward into 2014. And then depending on the outcome of the potential parks bond measure, this could be used as additional funding for some additional parks improvements. And that's it for capital projects.
Any questions, leftover questions as we wrap those funds up?
Okay, then moving on to the enterprise funds, what we did is give you a little bit of a view of what's happening with the three utilities, water, sewer, and storm. So you can see the beginning. We had some conversations on October the 14th about some cash balances and using those cash balances for capital projects. So what we did was I broke out the three utilities, you can see that overall we have 6.1 million in the water utility, and then we have planned operating expenditures of 5.3. That results in an ending fund balance of 2.7 million. Of that 2.7 million, we are recommending that 900,000 get moved forward into the water capital project funds in order to use those resources to construct capital assets. And then we have 550,000 that gets moved into a debt service fund for some existing debt that we have from a 2001 bond issue. That would then leave an estimated adjusted fund balance of 1.2 million. We recently adopted some reserve requirements, and so for the water and sewer fund, we had 2 months of operating reserve, which is approximately 6.7%. And when you take that against the planned expenditures, it's approximately 883,000 would be the required estimated ending fund balance, and you can see that we would be at nearly 1.3 million, so we would be meeting our financial policy in that fund. Going on to the sewer fund, the beginning fund, estimated beginning fund balance is 1.2.
And back to the water. We've got a 2001 bond issuance that is still outstanding.
What we did was we did a refinancing in 2011, so it extended the payment dates.
Okay.
But the actual issuance of debt for capital projects has not been since 2001.
Okay.
The city pretty much functions on a pay-as-you-go versus using debt service. So for revenues, as you're aware too, in the sewer utility, the majority of our expenditures are related to payments to King County Metro. Only a small portion is really related to the operating component for the city of Issaquah. So we're estimating revenues at 7.6 million. There is no King County Metro rate increase proposed for next year. Estimated expenditures, with the majority of it being King County Metro, is 7.1. Estimated ending fund balance is 1.7, with a recommendation of 400,000 to capital, resulting in an adjusted ending fund balance of 1.3. The required estimate of using a 2-month reserve approximately is 1.188, so we still have sufficient estimated ending fund balance to meet our reserve requirements. And then the storm utility, 4.4 million in revenue, 3.4 million in expenditures, 2.2 ending fund balance before any transfers to capital purposes. So 400,000 is recommended moving into the capital for their projects, which we'll be talking about here shortly. Estimated adjusted ending fund balance is 1.8. And then the required estimate is, because this fund has a lower requirement for estimated ending fund balance because the money pretty much comes in every month, and it is a very stable fund. So the recommendation was to use a one month reserve, and so that reserve is at 276,000. So then looking at the capital funds, you can see, particularly in the water utility, you'll see that we have a very strong beginning fund balance of 4.5 million. In 2012, we received approximately 3.6 million from Cascade Water Alliance. At this point, those projects wouldn't begin moving forward until 2015. The revenue coming in from various sources, including the transfer, is 1.3 million. Planned expenditures is 2.5, so their ending fund balance would be 3.2. So coming forward in 2015, we would then make some recommendations to use some of the funding from Cascade Water Alliance for some major capital projects in 2015. Sewer utility, the revenue is 543,000 with planned expenditures of 656,000, resulting in an ending fund balance of 724,000. And then in the storm utility, you can see we have revenues of 2.2, expenditures of $3 million with an estimated ending fund balance of $269,000. While that number is low, if you recall in the previous slide, we had a very high ending cash balance. So you can always move more into capital or you can keep it in operations. But I think when you look at capital, unless you're really planning for an emergency, as long as you have strength between both your operating fund and your capital fund combined, that's where you really need to look versus the individual fund. So you still have sufficient strength in your storm utility that combined you have nearly a $2 million ending cash balance. Okay, so the capital projects, I will turn back to the subject matter experts.
As you can see on the slide, the water capital projects, there's 3 projects that are in the design phase. The South Spar Booster Pump Station, which is not just the booster pump station, but it's also the transmission main that goes up to the South Spar. We're currently negotiating contract with a consultant to begin that design, and the money is funded through the WASH.TDR mitigation for the water utility. The replacement of the Mount Hood pump station and the Forest Rim pump stations, those are aging pump stations that have met their useful life, and we're designing the reconstruction of those. The replacement of the Mount Hood, I believe, is tentatively planned out for 2015, while Forest Rim is 2016. Question?
This is out of sequence. I'm just don't want to mention it. Go back. You mentioned Forest Rim and that pump. I know there's like a temporary road fix up there. That's not related to, I realize, the utility funds or capital project, but I think that's a question I'm going to want to get back to eventually, because it seems to me it's a temporary fix.
I almost answered that because you beat me to it. So we'd like to know the status of that and next steps, if any.
And then in 2014, we're planning to actually reconstruct a new pump station at Mountain Park Pump Station, which will enhance the fire capabilities in the Mount Hood zone and supplement storage in that area as well. The annual water main rehab is the annual program that we've been doing for nearly 2 decades now, about 3,000 feet of water main, and I don't know the specific areas that will be done next year, but it's a standard program that we do. The reservoir overflow discharges are to help with the maintenance department, and when they drain a reservoir, they need to deal with dechlorination and how to discharge the stormwater. And right now, the way the reservoirs are set up and the stormwater regulations, they basically have to take a really long time to drain the reservoirs to be able to accommodate the stormwater regulations. And so the retrofits are to design it and build something to allow them to drain the reservoir faster and help keep their costs down when dealing with reservoir maintenance issues. And I will let Brett explain the next 3.
Yeah, and in addition to that, they also are, the overflows are going to get some air gaps on them for cross connection. The Highwood Reservoir communications, that's just upgrading an old communication system, telemetry system to the current digital equipment. Risden Wells 1 and 2, putting a new roof on that, and then upgrading an analyzer and telemetry, the associated telemetry at the Holly Booster Pump Station, Summit Reservoirs.
Stacy?
I have a question that's probably for Diane. So back on the utility capital funds, we talked about the money from Cascade Water Alliance, and it's in the water capital. So what can that money be spent on?
It can be spent on water capital projects. One of the things that we've been talking about using it for is the pump station and the transmission main up the Spar Road. It provides additional redundancy outside of an existing geologic hazard. that the other lines go up the hill in. So it would help provide redundancy up to the Swedish and the whole community up there in Issaquah Highlands.
Is that the South Spar booster?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Booster and transmission main.
that's what prompted my question, because these are design projects.
Yes.
And so I wondered then where the money would be coming from for those, which prompted me to ask that question about the water capital. So how many of the design of the projects do we have proposed for design phase funding next year would we have construction funding for, and where would that money come from? Is that all coming from the water capital?
It would all come out of the water capital fund.
Is
Yeah.
that enough to cover all of this, all these three of these projects?
When it goes to construction, probably not, but I don't know what the amount of money that would get transferred into the water capital from the water fund would be in any given year. That's a question I'd have to coordinate with Diane and see what the revenues are that are available.
You can see this year we believe that in 2014, we can at least transfer 900,000. I think in previous years that dollar amount has been between 6 to 800,000. So typically there's a sufficient revenue in the operating fund that we could use that to support capital projects.
Do we have a ballpark figure for these projects?
I don't have it right off the top of my head. We can get back to you with that if you want.
Okay.
It's in the CIPs
Okay.
that were produced.
Yeah. Of course.
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Diana. Let's see. The water main replacement program continues. Looks like it goes up. We had a request for $700,000. The Spar Booster pump station in Maine is right about $3 million. The Mount Hood pump station is $1.1 million. Forest Rim in 2016 is roughly $650,000. So, according to the planning documents that we've done.
Thanks. Sue? Sure.
We're on still. Okay. The sanitary sewer capital projects, the Holiday Inn lift station replacement is completion of the design work to replace the current lift station that is set in the curb at 12th Avenue right there by the Holiday Inn. That's why it's called the Holiday Inn lift station. We're trying to figure out a way to eliminate it completely.
Brilliant name.
Yeah,
Wow.
very original.
Very creative, yeah.
Yeah. And that lift station that lift station provides service to the City Hall Northwest as well as Holiday Inn. So we're trying to figure out a way to construct and basically eliminate a pump station there to start with. So we're currently working on it now, but the $30,000 is to continue and finish design work. The annual sewer rehabilitation program is relining sanitary sewer pipe. The manhole rehab is to recondition manholes that are leaking.
And the lift station pump is an impeller for a pump station. It's an impeller for one of the pumps.
So let's see, stormwater. Design phase, we have 3 of them. Issaquah Highlands stormwater capacity improvements, and evaluating the storm system up there and the continued growth up there. There's ways which we can reconfigure the ponds to accommodate the additional growth and things like that. So that's what that money is for. The $260,000 is expected to come from developer mitigation money out of the TDR parcels. So that's where the $260,000 would be coming from. The anti-aircraft creek culvert replacements, that's also known as Summerhill Creek, where it crosses Newport Way. The creek makes a dog leg and blows out and covers Newport Way with gravel during times of high flow. So this is the design work to replace that culvert. And then the other is stabilizing Sunrise Place drainage. If you go up off Sunrise Place, there's a drainage that is tributary to Cabin Creek that comes off of, I forget the name of the street now, but it's near the circle up top. It's heavily eroded, and this is designed to help mitigate that erosion from continuing.
Excuse me. So the first project there, so that's not, you said that's, the funds are coming, you mentioned where the funds are coming from. I don't even see it at all in the capital facilities plan.
No, that project came up post those being developed. When we were coordinating with developers and the needs up there, we own the systems up there, and they would pay us to do all the work.
So where?
It's going to be in multiple different ponds, orifice structures, things like that for discharge and controlling how the water flows through the storm system.
Are we touching any of the 81 acres that feed into the L rig?
No, I don't believe we are. It's up above that area. And all it is it's changing primarily the control structures and things of that nature. It's not adding or moving water from one basin to another, not that I'm aware of, which would be your concern.
That would be a big deal, yeah.
Yeah, that would be a huge deal. That would probably be greater than $260,000 if we were shifting basins around.
Well, yeah, that probably gets into EIS and things, I imagine.
Maybe so.
Okay, so this is, okay, that's all right, it has nothing to do with the catch basin for the L rig.
Nope,
Okay,
not that I'm aware.
So I see it in the capital facilities plan.
you really?
Oh,
Yeah,
is it there?
it's on section 8, page 13. It says,
It must have gotten in there right at the level.
Oh, yeah, it's not labeled Highlands, it just.
so it says total, so usually you have a
Stormwater capacity improvement.
sort of a design, and then you have a capital, or the construction cost, and this one just says total 260, total. So, but this says design is 260.
Yeah, it should be able to be done for the 260,
Oh,
including
so it's not just-
construction.
Yeah, it's only showing 1 year of expenses. I
Yeah,
see it now.
It should be just the 1 year
I see it
expenditure.
Sure,
now.
but
It just
up
says
here-
Issaquah Highlands.
But up
Yeah,
here it
there it
says
is.
design.
Yeah.
So this slide really should say total cost, not design only.
No, this would be design and construct.
Okay.
The targeted outcome, according to this, is the complete the modeling and design analysis and construct improvements.
Okay.
Okay, so Confluence Park stream habitat restoration, we've been successful in bringing in additional grants to the other grants that we have. So we're going to be conducting the environmental improvements along Issaquah Creek and the East Fork. Stream habitat restoration for small projects, we were successful in bringing in a grant. I believe it was for about $250,000, and that's Lewis Creek work. Park maintenance facility, we were also successful in bringing in a grant for that for the current parks maintenance facility at the confluence of the East Fork and Main Stem, and that's to help mitigate some of their erosion and sediment control issues that they have on site. There'll be some paving and some stormwater controls installed.
So, may I stop you there? Again, I'm looking at the capital facilities plan. I think this is item 5, parks maintenance facility and NPDES stormwater. That shows a total of 90. Did something change? Obviously, something did.
Yeah, what we had was we had a reduced scope, not knowing whether we'd get the grant or not. But since we were able to get the grant, we were able to do more of what we really need to do there. Pave a bit more, control the stormwater better, and that's through grant money. The $90,000 was like bare minimum. We really wanted to do a lot more than $90,000 worth. And so we didn't get the grant until later in the year.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, so the W4 perimeter fencing that came about as a requirement from our insurance carrier to provide some protection for that pond.
And then the annual drainage rehab and improvement, that's in the storm system. We TV and we look for places where we need to fix broken pipes and things like that for the stormwater and correct local drainage issues. East Lake Sam Parkway drainage improvements, that's actually, that probably should have gone into the design study area. But that's looking at the East Lake Sam Parkway drainage issues that are in the BMC area, trying to figure out what to do about them. The East Lake Sam Parkway floods in time of heavy rain. Somewhat challenged because we've got the railroad grade blocking it, and
Could put a
the
bridge.
drainage ditches have a hard time conveying the water, and so trying to get the analysis done. It's probably the same study. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe design. So I was right, it was supposed to be design, but the number up there is not the correct. The slides, it should be a $50,000 number, and that project should go into the design area. Construction would be 2015.
It is reflected on page 826 and 827, correct?
And that's the same number in the facilities plan.
Yeah.
So that completes our enterprise review.
Wow. So
It's exciting.
let me guess, we're going to internal service funds now?
Yes.
Well, let's move along.
What other than this, what else is on the agenda for
That's
tonight?
it.
No. Human service.
Debt service and human services, we've done some review of human services because it's part of the general fund, but because it was advertised under your agenda bill, it's included in case there were any citizens that wanted to comment. So we have a number of internal service funds. Several of them are very small. And what they are quasi-business or support of the general operations of the city. The first one is a very small fund, is our unemployment accrued benefits. What happens is when somebody, like maybe our summer or part-time help, is laid off because there isn't any work, they're eligible for unemployments. We're on a pay-as-you-go, and so when someone files a claim, then we pay the unemployment benefits. When we did the reorganization and we laid off, we saw some substantial increases in our unemployment benefits, but at this point in time, it's pretty much normalized out over the last couple of years.
So I noticed that the 2013 estimate's a little less than 50,000. Next year, we're looking at 70,000. Why that big jump?
Well, we know one of the things is we've potentially planned for if the bond measure were to pass. We potentially, if we have to close the pool for several months, we could be in the
Gotcha.
position
Okay,
of additional unemployment benefits.
understand.
And sometimes when we have summer or part-time help, sometimes they choose to file for unemployment benefits and other times they don't. So we sort of, look to what the normal or traditional unemployment benefits. This year, we've been very, very fortunate. We thought there were a couple of people that were going to file for unemployment, and when we called, they said that those people had chosen not to.
Insurance fund.
Insurance fund. This is our annual insurance premium, as well as some support staff who manage our liability, property, auto, boiler, crimes and fidelity. So that's our overall payment for general liability insurance. And also what we talked about earlier, we went in and did a complete reallocation. Previously, the number had been the same for each department for many years. The auditor's office asked us to more clearly document our allocation plan, so that was something that we began. This fund, originally, it was anticipated that additionally, if we had any large claims payout, there are some additional reserves in that fund if we should have a significant payout. I know that, I believe Mr. Faulkner I think it was just, we recently had an audit from WCIA, and when we looked at our claims history, I can't remember if we had a council member there. One of the things is when we compare ourselves against like-sized city in the pool, the city of Issaquah is very fortunate in that we're probably down in the lower 20% of the entire group as far as claim history, when claims annually are running about 1.5 million over a 5-year period. A lot of cities are seeing like 1.5 million in claims. We, over a 5-year period, had about 550,000. So when it comes to claims management, when it comes to safety, when it comes to working with departments, we do extremely well in managing our claims and our incidents. Every department is very good about making sure that, they are safety conscious and as responsible as they can be. The medical self-insurance fund, this is a relatively new fund, and we're still growing with it as it grows. As we indicated in October the 14th meeting, as of October the 1st, all of our employees are now part of the medical insurance fund. We just recently met with our broker to look at our historical trends. We are doing, we're not exactly where we want to be, but nor are our claims exceeding what we had anticipated. We were hoping that we need about $460,000 at the end of the year to meet our reserve requirements with the state risk manager. Right now, we're projecting we're about $420,000. So we're only around $60,000 off the mark as far as our insurance reserves. What we have been doing is we have been paying, as far as claims, we pay a monthly premium per employee. Next year, we will move fully into being more of the traditional self-insurance. So that would be on a claims paid basis. So each week, whatever the claims Primera had paid, then we would send the money. This year, we have, just because we don't have the experience, we don't have any history, we are on a different model. We'll be spending some more time with the council because we haven't got our final rate changes. We know that there'll be a rate increase at this point in time. It appears to be under 5%, but the broker and Premier are still negotiating that piece. So when we get additional information on our medical premiums, we'll come back to the council. The equipment rental fund, and
I have a question. So the revenue total, or miscellaneous, the revenue sources, what are the revenue sources of this? Is this all premiums?
yes. Well, what we do is the majority of the revenue sources is from premiums. The general fund, we have 6 retired Left One officers. That is funded by the general fund, so that is a transfer from the general fund to the medical self-insurance fund. But the majority of it is premium, so every payroll we take premiums out of each of the departments at each of the divisions based upon the employees that reside in that fund, and then we move it into the self-insurance fund. So the equipment rental fund, the capital outlay is $1.6 million. There is a listing of a lot of our capital projects. If you go over to the next page, page 68, there's more clarifying information. So operating cost out of the fund is 1.2 million, and what that is for the mechanics and their supplies and their material, for the fuel costs, for repairs, and for supplies. So there's really two components in the equipment rental and replacement fund. One portion is related to day-to-day operations and maintenance of our rolling stock. And then there is the capital equipment replacement portion, which we have determined what assets we want to go replace, the replacement schedule, and then depending on who was the original owner of that asset or who purchased it, then we bring money in from the various funds, whether it's the general fund, whether it's water, sewer, or storm. So one of the things that we did was that fund balance is going down because when we looked at the cash related to the operating component, annual expenditures is 1.2 million, and as of the end of December 2012, our reserve related to operations was 50% of our operating costs. We bought down, instead of transferring as much money to support the operations, we're buying down the ending cash balance. The auditors has indicated that their belief is that 50% of the annual operating cost is too high. So we're trying to bring that balance down. Additionally, we have an obligation to fund some equipment replacement with the fire department. So next year, our portion of their capital replacement fund is $372,000, so we would transfer that to EFR. And then just the highlight and the more significant purchases, you'll see the financial system is $490,000. And a lot of this is money that has been accumulated maybe over 10 years that we track by each asset classification. PWO will be doing some replacement of their electronic handheld devices for $90,000. Overall for technology, including network servers and computer replacement, we have programmed in $75,000. We're looking at replacing one of our dump trucks for $70,000. Police equipment would be replacing 2 of our police vehicles and 1 motorcycle. We're looking at replacing 2 generators. We're looking at replacing a utility truck, and then there's parks equipment of $75,000. So it's a couple of trailers and some riding lawnmowers.
Moving to engineering services fund.
That one's an easy one. We no longer have that fund.
And the Ruth Keys Award Sustainability Environment Fund.
That's one of our trust funds that each year there's an award given to an employee in the city.
We've got that one.
And that's it. And then the last one is our human services. I think as we explained in the October 4th meeting, this is $280,000. This is the commission met, and this is a 2-year allocation. The budget calls for $288,000. The additional $8,000 in that allocation and how it will be spent, the commission will come back with further recommendations. So this is the same recommendation as in the 2013 budget. And that's it. Oh, debt service funds. Real quick, we've really never spent a lot of time talking about it, but our voted GO, which is paid for through property taxes, principal and interest payments for next year's is $1.4 million. Our councilmatic debt, if you recall, we have $2.3 million coming in from our capital improvement fund. That will pay $2,298,800 of principal and interest. Our LID guarantee fund, where our recommendation is to move $400,000 to the general fund. And then we have 2 outstanding LIDs currently, LID 23 and 24. And those are paid for by special assessments by the benefited party. And then that's the last slide. Okay. Any questions?
We have one more session? one more.
We have,
I did.
next week on Tuesday, we are here. And what are we talking about for that session next week?
On the 24th, it would be the follow-up to the questions. On the 29th, not the 24th. Got it. I'm like, on the 29th, we would respond to the council questions. Then you would have an opportunity to do deliberations, to have a conversation about what you see as any potential changes in the budget. We also realized when we did the 2013 budget, there was some council interest in next year's goals, so we have an opportunity, if you see some things, we would then sort of capture those notes, and when we went into 2015 goal setting, we would bring those forward. And then that's pretty much the topics. We would have a lot of the responses, several of them, in particular, the reorg. That question has, we probably have already invested about 100 to 120 hours, and we still have a little bit of work because part of the difficulty is when the reorg occurred, we have all new people in the finance department, so we're sort of having to go back from ground zero and recreate a lot of the document and information. So we have a couple of questions that we're still having to do a lot of work, and then we have the additional questions. We have some of the responses from your questions from the 14th, and I'd hand those over to Bob if
If you want to go through them tonight, we can. If you want to wait till next time,
I
we can do
think
that.
the hour is late, and since this will be the first time we're looking at them, probably would not be as productive as we could be if we talked about them next go around. And that's important.
And so,
I-
go ahead, sorry.
So what is the expectation for our next budget workshop?
I believe the way the council laid it out in the agenda, Bill, is that we would complete the budget review that evening and finish and finalize the deliberations and then return to council a recommended budget to adopt for 2014.
Stacy?
So when would we expect to get the answers to all of the questions? So one fairly lengthy list of questions was submitted from Councilman Scher, who couldn't be here. And so I asked that because if we get them at the beginning or during the meeting, it's impossible for us to digest those and think about them during our final meeting.
I've started working on those questions, and many of the questions that were included in his requests for things that we talked about tonight, because he was not available to be here. So many of them, we could try to get quite a few of them out to you tomorrow, late tomorrow, and then we could let you know which other ones we need to do additional research on, because some of them just need us to go back into the accounting system. Many of them, like I said, have actually been answered tonight.
Okay. And the questions we asked here tonight, we can get those in advance of the meeting. Is that possible?
It's what we're working on, so we'll try and get as many out, and we'll feed these out to you. So we'll send some out tomorrow towards the end of the day, and then the remainder that aren't finished will get out on Monday to you. So.
Okay.
So my concern is there are two council members missing this evening. We've had two great work sessions and good discussion and developed an understanding of what's in the budget. A lot of times the tough part of it is the deliberations and the decisions. So hopefully we would be able to do that at the next meeting, but I worry a little bit that we might not be able to get there, quite frankly. And I don't know whether, I'll personally be comfortable, to wrap things up. So I think it would be a good idea to try to find another date for a tentative work session if we need that, so that we don't have to start looking next week, but we've identified a mutually agreeable date that would work for everyone.
I will do a doodle poll tomorrow, and we'll
Okay,
have you check your calendars, get back to us.
perfect. Anything else before we adjourn this evening? Then, great discussion this evening. Thanks to staff and everyone for the presentations, and we are adjourned.